Welcome, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Schenectady. We are so glad that you have chosen to gather in this place, in our Zoom sanctuary, or in this circle. I'm the Reverend Lynn Gardner, and I am one of the co-ministers here, along with the Reverend Wendy Bartell. In this place of refuge and resistance, we care about inclusion, and we welcome all those who side with love and justice, equity, and peace. And because we value those important ideas and practices, we share our pronouns along with our names. If you're referring to me in the third person, you can say she or they. Reverend Lynn loves to tell stories. She also loves coffee. If we're referring to Wendy in the third person, we should use Wendy because he, she, and they are just not the right fit. Almost like a sweater whose sleeves are too short. Those pronoun boxes aren't the right size for Wendy's gender identity. Reverend Wendy loves making music with others. Wendy also enjoys gluten-free, dairy-free pizza. Not long after we started as the co-ministers here in August of 2017, member Randy Jennings modeled respect and curiosity and asked about what if Randy was speaking about both of us? Is they a good way to speak of both of us? An emphatic yes. When you are speaking, hopefully kindly, about both of us, then they is a perfectly fine pronoun. And if you are visiting this congregation for the first time, we offer you an especially warm welcome. We hope that all will stay after the service today for a time of conversation and connection. And if naming pronouns is and if naming the pronouns you know to be accurate for your identity, and you didn't know that using persons accurate pronouns is a welcoming thing to people, excellent. Now you know. And if you're a person who's been naming and or using different pronouns options for decades, excellent. Now you know that you are in a community striving to practice that too. This morning, Rachel Stern Marr and John Marr, who are the parents of a trans young adult, will kindle our chalice, while Janae Stogden shares these words called Stories in the Making from Emily Richards.
Some stories begin once upon a time or long, long ago, but other stories begin here and now. These stories don't always have a clear direction. Sometimes they don't even have a clear beginning. What they do have is possibility. Those are stories still in the making, stories that have yet to be fully written, stories with the potential to create change for good or ill. We won't know how the story ends until we get there, but we can decide what words we use to write those stories. Words like hope, kindness, gratitude, peace, courage, perseverance, joy, and love. Above all else, love.
This year's UUA Common Read is a book called Authentic Selves, celebrating trans and non-binary people and their families. The Rainbow Connections team decided to lead a class using the UUA curriculum connected with the book. 28 of us have been reading, learning, thinking, and feeling our way through this powerful book of so many stories, so many variations on the human story. The format of the book is a person who identifies as transgender or non-binary or genderqueer shares a bit of their story in realizing their identity. Then a member or two of the person's family share a brief version of their story, learning the news and how it has been for them. These 35 people in the book which is behind me, and their families are from all over the place, from varied identities, religious backgrounds, religious configurations, family configurations, different classes, different races and ethnicities and ages. And in case the term transgender or gender non-binary or cisgender is newer for you, let's get some shared clarity. Biological sex is assigned at birth, usually by a doctor looking at a baby's genitals and making a determination. Based on the parts observed, a baby is assigned female or male and occasionally intersex, if the genitalia are ambiguous or a type of variation. Occasionally, there may be chromosomal tests if other concerns are raised, but usually it's a visual determination by a doctor. Biological sex observed on the outside. Our gender identity is how we feel, regardless of what sex we were assigned at birth. If our gender, that is how we feel on the inside, how we feel and know ourselves to be, matches the biological sex that we were assigned at birth, that scientific term is called cisgender. If you were born with a body that could be categorized and the doctor assigned you male, and you feel like a boy or a man, then you are a cisgender male or a cisgender boy or a cisgender man. The cisgender being the modifier of the type of male one is. Same for female and girls and women. Many of us gathered here in this circle and on Zoom, and those who will watch this later, have a gender identity that matches our sex assigned at birth. And so we're cisgender, or cis for short. You might be a cis woman or a cis man. Some of us gathered have a gender identity that does not match the sex that we were assigned at birth, and that scientific term is transgender. Trans is the modifier too. The main difference between cisgender and transgender is whether or not what we feel on the inside matches what we were assigned based on the outside as newborns. Same, cis. Different, trans. This morning, we hope to give you a sense of the book Authentic Selves, the class, and some personal reflections. And because Unitarian Universalism affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person, that includes cisgender people and transgender people, and all of the other fabulous words and ways that we use to describe our existence. Here are two stories excerpted from the book.
My name is David Pritchard. Good morning. He and him are good pronouns for me, as I am a cisgender man. I have several dear family members that identify as non-binary. I struggle to adapt to the new pronouns and chosen names, to find a way to show I care, and to explain that my mistakes I made were not a reflection or from a lack of support. Over time, of course, I improved, but saw that more could be done within myself. I became motivated to be a better ally for them and for the transgender, non-binary community. To be more welcoming, to understand that I can't totally understand, but that isn't about me understanding. I can strive to remain open and humble to the stories and life experiences. I hope to continue to gather new tools and insight on how I might go about this growth. The Authentic Selves course utilizes the power of the story to start a dialogue that joins our stories together. The course helped me to recognize how our stories are part of learning about gender and how they impact our lives. The focus on stories helped me to experience the people, lives, challenges, and triumphs that connect us as human beings instead of othering and separating cisgender people from transgender and non-binary people. We have been invited to consider our own biases, limitations, preconceptions, and fixed definitions. For example, in session 3, we were asked to name our own definitions of family, the other F word, and consider how we might challenge these perceptions and expand our definition. I could see my own conception stretched further after hearing the stories in the course and seeing how much my definition was shaped by the culture I grew up in. This course opened my mind to thinking of issues that I hadn't considered before. How my privilege as a cis male obscures how transgender and non-binary people might experience life. Finally, I am grateful that the course reminded me that this is a spiritual journey to be in better harmony with our UU values.
Good morning. I'm Jensen Pritchard, no relation to David that I know of. He, him are good pronouns for me. I am a transgender man. I knew that I felt different from a very young age, but I didn't have the right words to explain it. In Elliot Page's memoir, Page Boy, he said, "What is this feeling that never goes away? How can I be desperately uncomfortable all the time?" I knew I didn't have the same interest as the other little girls. I wanted to read books or play with matchbox cars or action figures. I wanted to follow my guy cousins around and see what they were doing. I couldn't understand why I couldn't join the Boy Scouts. My mom did her best to teach us acceptance because being different was not a bad thing. But then we would go over to my Uncle Mark's to visit with his roommate. I never questioned why they only had one bedroom. Being gay felt both accepted but also taboo at the same time. I think this happens a lot in families. I like to tell people that I fell and tripped through the LGBTQIA alphabet until I found myself. Pause for chuckles. I have questioned both my gender and sexuality for many years, trying to figure out what truly felt like me. No journey is the same, nor could it ever be compared to someone else's. We each have our own authentic story to tell. I discovered my identity playing Dungeons and Dragons. For those of you who know me, finding myself in this absolute nerdiest way possible felt right. The game allowed me to explore myself in a safe way because I was just playing a character. I could play around with pronouns and names. I could see what fit or didn't fit. But it was okay because I was just creating a character. It just felt safer. Elliot Page went on to say, "Why do we lose that ability to create a whole world? A bunk bed was a kingdom. I was a boy." Being transgender or trans in America today feels like navigating a strange world full of both hope and fear. While there are many spaces of acceptance and progress, the constant wave of anti-trans legislation, hate speech, and discrimination has left me feeling extremely vulnerable. Each day, there's this weight in the back of my mind wondering if we'll be safe, accepted, or if the next headline will bring another attack on our rights or our bodies. It's exhausting to watch both politicians and media outlets stirring up fear with misinformation about our existence. The new regime and their media partners keep calling this gender ideology extremism as a way of scaring people. They keep trying to pretend that the last administration was engaged in erasing women, which of course it was not. What the so-called radical gender ideology is that we transgender and genderqueer and gender non-binary people simply want to exist authentically, stay alive, and help one another thrive. We continue to fight for the right to simply exist, even when it feels like the world is pushing back. But we can't do that alone. This church has given me a space to grow and find myself in a community where diverse perspectives are embraced and personal growth is encouraged. I found the freedom to explore myself without fear of judgment from most of you. It's a space where I can bring my full self, my doubts, questions, and identity without having to fit into a small box. And I am grateful that most UUs are creating spaces like this. And I am so glad to be part of the Rainbow Connections team and part of facilitating the Authentic Selves class.
Thank you both. And thank you to Roz and Holly for reading. Thank you. This whole month, we've been exploring stories. We started up stewardship season with stewardship testimonials to learn more about why folks give to this congregation. Don't forget to turn in your pledge sheet if you haven't yet today. We considered the way stories are told and what is kept silent, so whose stories are shared and are not, how we tell the story matters, and who tells it too. We heard stories at the gates of hope from Unitarian and Universalist ancestors Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Thomas Starr King, and Lucy Stone. We learned a few stories about what the UU Service Committee is doing last week. And today, we've heard the authentic stories of trans and cis folks. One of the powerful activities that we did together in session 1 was to explore gender privilege. There were 30 items read, and if they applied to you, you took a step forward. And if they did not, you just stayed where you were. And for those who were on Zoom, because we're doing a multi-platform class, you were invited to type a P into the chat box, but not to hit enter until all of the P's, P for privilege, P's would be visible at once at the end when people hit enter. Those in the room, in this room, in the back and coming down these stairs, could look at one another and see where everyone was located throughout. And those on Zoom, and when we came back into the Emerson room, could see all the P's on the chat box on the screen. We learned some things that day, and we want to share some of what we learned with you by having you get to experience this. So those of you who are in the class and would like to and are in the room, you are invited to come forward onto this step so that we can give other folks in the room and the folks on Zoom what it feels like. In your own mind, where you're sitting, you might just maybe raise a finger or touch a finger for each time you might have taken a step forward, and not raising one if you wouldn't. If we have too many people in the class, we might have to do this in a different way, because let's see, how can we do this so that we can actually all fit? All right, leave a spot for me next to you, Barbara. And I'm going to be right between Barbara and Holly, so leave a spot for me. Do you have enough room on that end to take a step or not? Okay, great. I am going to repeat the exercise, Sarah. Thanks for asking. So these folks will hear words, and if the statement is true for them, they will take a step forward. And if it's not true, they'll just stay where they are. Now, it's tricky because we're not really in a straight line here. Some of us could never be in a straight line. But anyway, so we'll be moving gaily and otherwise forward. I actually wonder if maybe we might actually start maybe the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe up to David, if you wouldn't mind coming up onto this back step, and you'll just create a second line and then spread back out again, because it will not be visually, it won't work as well. So you'll just be careful in taking the step forward. And for those of you who weren't part of the orientation before the service, the step you take to go down a step is the step. Don't take an additional step too. Okay? Make sense? Okay, so if this statement is true, we'll follow our directions. And you can just do it on your own, in your own sort of hands, if you want to do that yourself.
If this statement is true for you, take one step forward if you are standing, or raise one finger if you are sitting. If it is not true for you, remain where you are. 1. I can use public facilities such as restrooms, gym locker rooms, and store changing rooms without verbal abuse, physical intimidation, or fear. My validity as a man, woman, human is not based on how much surgery I've had or how well I pass as transgender. I can walk throughout the world and generally blend in, not being constantly stared at or gawked at, whispered about, pointed at, laughed at because my gender expression does not match other people's perceptions of my gender. My family or friends do not persist in calling me my, quote, real name, my birth name, or need to be reminded over and over to use my correct pronouns. I can reasonably assume that my ability to acquire a job, rent an apartment, or secure a loan will not be denied because of my gender, identity, or expression. I can easily find role models and mentors to emulate who share my identity without others complaining about their existence. Hollywood accurately depicts people of my gender in films and television does not solely make the identity the focus of a dramatic storyline, or the punchline for a joke, or the punchline of a joke. I can assume that everyone I encounter will understand my identity and not think I am confused, misled, or hellbound when I reveal it to them. No stranger checking on my identification or driver's license will ever insult or glare at me because of my name. My name or declared sex does not match the sex that they believe I am based on my gender expression. My gender is included as an option on standard forms. I can go to places with friends on a whim, knowing there are always bathrooms I can use. I can join a team to play an organized sport without being questioned over my gender or debating whether my gender gives me an advantage over other players. Look around and see who has moved forward the most and who has hardly moved at all. How many fingers did you raise, if any? There are many stories embedded in this exercise. Thank you for being willing to help make some parts of the stories visible. You may now return to your seats.
This is part of visibility 2. Making visible, making known what many of us do not get to take for granted. That some of us do not have the same rights or perks or benefits or day-to-day ease that some others have. You'll notice the back line exceeded the front line, at least for 2 of us. Now, witnessing this or participating in this might bring up shame or maybe embarrassment for where we found ourselves in the exercise. Let that shame just be a signal to us that we might have some personal healing work to do, because there ought not to be any shame in any one of us in being the gender that we are. That shame is somebody else's stuff. Being exactly who you are is who you are. The problem isn't our identities or the pronouns or the names. There's something wrong in the village. Greed, fear, ignorance, lies, all that. Non-binary and genderqueer and trans people are here to remind us that the boxes are often too small for all of us. These kinds of exercises help us learn what perhaps we did not already know, that privilege can come in many forms. And using the privileges that we have can make a real difference for those of us who have less privilege in a particular area. I know some of you are using your privileges already. And if you need some ideas, here are a few. Because right now, we need people to use their privilege to advocate for positive legislation, to protect us, and get good people elected. Send Representative Sarah McBride, who serves from Delaware, a thank you note for the work she is doing, not just because she happens to be the first openly trans woman in the House of Representatives, but because of the work she's actually doing. Thank you notes go a long way. I called and the office and the person who answered the phone was so thrilled that someone was calling to say something positive. And you could choose to take a small, more localized risk. After the service, you can come up to the chancel and choose a button to wear. Just one, because there aren't enough for everybody, and everyone's not going to choose a button, and that's okay. There's no pressure to choose, because you can also order your own buttons from the Syracuse Cultural Workers community in Syracuse, who's awesome. And the buttons that you might choose say Black Trans Lives Matter. Or if you identify as a person who's trans, or perhaps a parent or a caregiver for one who's trans, it won't be erased with a trans flag on it. Or gender is not binary. Or protect trans people. or a progress pride flag, or a pronouns button. And try wearing them everywhere you go. And just see what happens. You never know what kinds of conversations you might get into and what lives you might save. You could also come into the dining room after the service and paint some signs, because visible support can save lives. And no matter how many executive orders are issued or how many lies are told, we know that transgender lives are worth living and celebrating authentically. Let us help to make sure others know that is so. Blessed be, and amen.